And Micheál, the floor is over to yourself.
No, thank you everyone, and great to see everyone here. I'm going to close off, just reflect on a few things. I know I'm standing between you and the canteen, it looks like, you know. But listen, I know, I mean, for all of you who've joined us today, and I think we can agree with, I think we've had a really, really interesting morning. We've had 9 presentations, and we've had 3 panel discussions, and loads of questions, and loads of interactions, so it's been fantastic. If you're like me, you can only remember the last 2 or 3, so I'll just try and reflect back. You know, some of the things I've picked up as we went through the morning, and you know, really, when you think about it, going back to the very start of the morning, the Minister set the scene for us, and you know, he really started off by talking about the synergies between, you know, joining climate change and air quality issues, you know, and that they both are, I suppose, both climate and air pollution are sharing a lot of the same issues, and so their solutions are also intertwined, is what I took from that. He did talk about the need to increase our level of ambition and on cleaning our air, but he also talked about the challenges that has faced, particularly at a national level. But after much consultation, we now have the new solid fuel regulations, a really significant step in the right direction. But we also, you know, heard from him that about the need for increased enforcement and compliance with these at a national level. And I suppose, and anchoring all of this would be a clean air strategy coming in 2023. Laura Burke then joined us from as the head of the EPA, and I suppose Laura's first key message is that, you know, we have a national asset with clean and fresh air, but we can't take it for granted, and there are impacts on poor air quality and health, and the choices we make in heating our homes and in how we travel directly impact, you know, our local air quality and therefore our health as well. Laura also highlighted the need for and the co-benefits of joining up the climate change and the air quality actions and ambitions and issues, but not just there, but also in other policy areas as well. And so she did actually finally put that call that the EPA had out in its last State of the Environment report, that for a need for a national policy position on the environment to allow us all to align, I suppose, all the national plans and actions and ambitions to maximise all these co-benefits that we're talking about. And then in the final part of that session, we had Dr. Maria Nera, and like really coming from the WHO perspective and putting that air as very much as a public health issue, and the challenges that it faces, and I suppose the impacts across the world of poor air quality. And she talked about her prescriptions, right, and the good opportunities that are there to kind of tackle air pollution and its impacts. And some of those suggestions, again, we're joining up with the climate change communities, and you can see the same themes coming through, and particularly the COPs that are there. You know, because essentially both areas, the climate and the air, they're trying to tackle the same issues around, you know, reducing combustion of or tackling combustion of fossil fuels. She did point out from our perspective really that COP 2027 wasn't ambitious enough, but by using a health argument, maybe that we could accelerate ambition and accelerate action around this. And then finally, she picked up on the communication and the challenges around that, and the need to kind of change the narrative to more motivating and I suppose enhancing and explaining the health benefits of clean air. In session 2, you know, this is all about then leading into communicating on the health impacts. And first of all, we had Dr. Ian Quintain, again, you know, coming very much from the medical perspective. And I suppose for me, one of the things I picked up, if you're standing on a congested street, every breath you take is 20 million particles into your lungs, you know, and that's something very powerful to remember. And with that, you know, if you have poor air quality, you have impacts. And he talked about the numbers of deaths and premature deaths and the increased morbidity and mortality, but also the high level of I suppose, you know, it's the high level of pollutants and how they change with the increasing pollutants. For me, I really liked that slide he showed on. He introduced us really to this pyramid effect from air pollution, you know, where you had the severity of effects, the population that's affected, the proportion of population affected, and then the magnitude of the impacts in that triangle. And so it's not, you can talk about the deaths, but actually there's a bigger impact all the way down into that triangle. And so he thought about what we needed to do, and I suppose he called it his call to arms for us and for all of us in the room today and watching online. The second session, or the second talk on that was from Ailish from the Asthma Society, and I think we can all agree that was the most powerful visualization, really, of the challenge of people who are trying to manage asthma in difficult situations and not being able to afford it, and wondering if air quality or not heating the home has had an impact on that. She talked about the prevalence of asthma in Ireland in 1 in 10, but that, you know, and it's not just the numbers, it's the consequence of that in terms of the number of visits to the GPs, to hospitals, and the actual cost to the economy. And that really, while it is prevalent, it is absolutely more dominant and more predominant in socially disadvantaged areas, which coincidentally then, as she pointed out, are the areas which are more prone to air pollution and air quality impacts. She also talked to us about that public attitudes on air quality and the low level of awareness we still have on air pollutants and health risks. So really, from her perspective, she was saying there's still an increased need to, you know, for public awareness, for education, as well as mobilisation. But in all of that, we must take an equality approach as well to it. And then finally, we had Pat Kenny, who's from the EPA, who talked to us and took us through the air quality monitoring programme and how it's evolved in 2017 from 29 stations to 116 now when it was finished early next year, and moving to an awful lot of real-time monitoring, and then using the Air Quality Index for Health, communicating, you know, the real-time data out in a much more easily understood way and for information and advice to the public. And he also then, you know, in looking and saying, what does that monitoring show us and what do we need to do? And he gave us those 4 points. He said, you know, we need to move to WHO guidelines. We need to increase enforcement at local level. We need to move towards cleaner ways of heating our homes and reducing then our car usage, even if it's only for the last mile or so, in any way you can. And then finally, then we moved into our last session here on what happens next, and you know, that's a really, really useful one from Kevin, starting off and just talking about the Life Emerald project. So this for me is about moving beyond monitoring, moving beyond communications and the simple of just monitoring and data into what we're going to have now is forecasting, modelling, and nowcasting. And he demonstrated some of those, and I thought, I hadn't seen it. A really, really, really good little slide there on using sound and music to communicate air pollution and how powerful maybe that could be. And then Irene was then continuing to pick up on this whole area of communications and the challenge of communication, on air quality issues and impacts. Simple message at the high level, you know, it's fires and cars, you know, that's simple. But there's a need for a much more strategic and nuanced and long-term approach and in communicating those messages out to wider audiences. But health is the key message all around that. And then finally, Sabrina, and I'm glad Sabrina was the last person of all that, because for me, Sabrina makes it real. She talks about the people we work with, and she talks about dealing with the public and trying to work and engage and empower people through citizen science and getting the messages across as well. So, you know, a really, you know, a wide-ranging talks, but you can see the common themes of both communications, co-benefits, health impacts, all of these things coming through. So, you know, for me, it was a great morning. There's more to come for the public authorities in the afternoon and so on. But I think for anyone joining in, I hope you got an awful lot out of this. I want to just take this opportunity to thank all of the speakers and all of the chairs and all of you who participated, of course, as well. You know, both online and present in the room. You know, it was great to have that. Also to thank everyone who has organised the conference. These things, when they are hybrid, they're just that bit more difficult, and I think hopefully it's all been running smoothly, it seems to have, and that takes a lot of effort, and well done to everybody. Just to say, all the presentations will be available, and they'll be available in the next coming weeks on the EPA YouTube channel, and there will be a survey, I'm assuming, will be sent out in the coming weeks as well. And could you please answer that? It's really, really useful for us to hear back from you how you experienced on the day, and it always helps us to be able to organise future events around this as well. So with all of that, I have 4 minutes I got in there saved for you. So with all of that, thank you all, and I'll close the conference this morning. Thank you.